On October 13th, 1917, somewhere between 70,000 and 100,000 people stood in a muddy field in central Portugal and watched the sun move. Many of them were devout believers, but many were not. Journalists came to mock, atheists came to debunk, and government officials came to discredit. Among the non-believers who attended was a newspaper editor, a self-described freethinker and Freemason, who had spent months publicly ridiculing the entire story as a hoax invented by ignorant peasants. 2 days later, he wrote a front-page article with this headline, "Astounding Things: How the Sun Danced at Midday in Fatima." What happened in that field that day remains one of the most extensively documented claimed miracles in modern history. This is the story of the miracle of the sun. To understand what happened at Fatima, you have to understand the Portugal of 1917. This miracle unfolded not in a time of peace, but amid constant chaos across the country. 7 years earlier in 1910, a revolution had overthrown the Portuguese monarchy and established a republic, one dominated by Freemasons who were openly hostile to the Catholic Church. This new government moved fast and hard against Christians. Convents and monasteries were shut down, church property was confiscated, Jesuits were even stripped of their citizenship. On top of all of this, religious teaching was banned from schools, and priests were forbidden from wearing the cassock in public. Even the ringing of church bells was restricted by law. One historian described it bluntly. This was, for the Catholic Church in Portugal, the darkest period in the nation's history. At the same time, Portugal had entered the First World War, sending tens of thousands of young men to fight and die in the trenches of France. Economic collapse, political assassinations, and a government that changed hands again and again. This was the Portugal that Our Lady chose to visit. Fatima was not a city. It was a scattering of whitewashed stone houses in the rugged hill country of central Portugal, in a hamlet called Aljustrel. Life there moved to the rhythm of sheep and seasons. The Bible was the only source of literature that most families owned. 3 children lived at the center of what was about to happen. Lúcia dos Santos was 10 years old, sharp-eyed, a natural leader, and the youngest of 7 children to a hardworking father and a devout mother. Her cousin Francisco Marto was 9, gentle, mischievous, in love with animals and the outdoors, a boy who once gave away his only penny to free a captured bird. And his younger sister Jacinta was just 7, a tender-hearted young girl who, by many, was considered gifted and advanced for her age. These were the 3 children who, beginning in the spring of 1916, said they had already seen something extraordinary. An angel who called himself the Angel of Peace and the Guardian of Portugal. On May 13, 1917, while tending sheep in a hollow called the Cova da Iria, the children saw a flash of lightning, and then a woman standing on a small holm oak tree, brighter than the sun, dressed in white with a rosary in her hands. The woman told them not to be afraid and asked them to return on the 13th day of each month for 6 months. She asked them to pray the rosary every day for peace and for an end to the war. The children ran home, told their families what they had seen, but as you'd expect, their families did not entirely believe them. Regardless, word began to spread quickly, as it usually does in small communities. By the 13th of June, the next month, dozens of people came to watch, to see if the 3 children's story was indeed true. By July, thousands had begun to gather. During that July visit, the lady allegedly entrusted the children with 3 secrets. Visions that the children would carry in near silence for years to come. The first concerned hell itself. The second concerned wars yet to come. And the third was a secret not revealed in full for decades. As the crowds grew, so did the alarm of local authorities. The administrator of the district, a man named Artur de Oliveira Santos, a Freemason and committed anti-clerical, decided the apparitions were a dangerous hoax that needed to be stopped before it spread further. On August the 13th, the day of the 4th scheduled visit from Our Lady, Santos intercepted the children on the road and tricked them into his carriage. He took them not to the Cova da Iria, but to the town hall and then to jail. Santos separated them, and he told each child individually that the other two had already been executed, hoping fear of being the last one alive would break their resolve and force a confession that their whole story was all made up. He threatened to boil them alive in oil if they would not reveal what the lady had told them in secret. Incredibly, though, the children did not break. Inside that jail cell, 7-year-old Jacinta took out her brown scapular, hung it on the wall, and asked every prisoner in the room to kneel with her and pray the rosary. Hardened men who had likely never prayed in years knelt on a jail floor with a 7-year-old girl who believed she was about to die for the truth. Because none of the children would break, they were released 2 days later and dropped off on the steps of the parish house. They had missed their appointment on the 13th, but between 6,000 and 18,000 people came to the Cova da Iria that day, drawn by the hope of seeing something. When the next appearance occurred on August 19th, the lady told the children that, because of interference from the authorities, the miracle in October would not be quite as grand as it otherwise would have been. By September, word of Fatima had traveled the length of Portugal. Tens of thousands now knew the children's claim, that on October 13th, the lady would perform a miracle visible to everyone so that all might believe. This was an enormous risk for 3 simple peasant children to take publicly. The anti-clerical press had a field day, relentlessly mocking the story. In the weeks leading up to October 13th, they were certain they were about to witness the public humiliation of 3 foolish children and all the gullible peasants who believed them. One of those newspapers was O Século, Portugal's largest paper, which was openly aligned with the secular, anti-clerical government. The paper even sent its star reporter Avelino de Almeida to Fatima with a very specific assignment: document the inevitable disappointment and put the story to rest for good. Almeida had no idea what he was truly about to witness. On the morning of October 13th, 1917, rain fell in sheets over central Portugal. Still, they came by foot, ox cart, and train. Some even walked over 20 miles through standing mud to reach the Cova da Iria. Estimates of the final crowd ranged from 30,000 on the low end to over 100,000 on the high end. Most historians now place the number at approximately 70,000 people. Among them were believers who had prayed for this day for months. Skeptics who came specifically to watch 3 be exposed as liars. And of course, Avelino de Almeida standing in the rain with his notebook, fully expecting to write the story that would end Fatima forever. At 1:30 in the afternoon, the children arrived. The rain continued. The crowd waited. Yet nothing was happening. Then, according to Lúcia, the lady appeared to the children one final time, identifying herself by name. "I am the Lady of the Rosary." Lúcia turned to the crowd and cried out, "Look at the sun!" Then, according to thousands of independent testimonies, the rain stopped. The thick clouds tore open, and the sun, which moments earlier had been obscured by storm, became visible as a dim, silver disk that the entire crowd could stare directly into without pain. Avelino de Almeida, the skeptical newspaper editor, described what he saw in his own words just 2 days later. The sun trembled, made brusque and unheard-of movements beyond all cosmic laws. The sun seemed literally to dance in the sky. Witnesses across the crowd reported the same series of events. The disk spinning like a wheel of fire, casting off brilliant rays of red, blue, green, and violet light that fell across the landscape, tinting people's faces and clothing in shifting color. Then, witnesses said, the sun appeared to break loose from the sky entirely and plunge toward the earth. Mass panic broke out. People were screaming and fell to their knees in the mud, certain that the end of the world had arrived. Confessions were shouted aloud in the open field by people who had not been inside a church in years. Then it stopped. The sun returned to its place and the terror passed. multiple witnesses reported that the ground and the clothing of 70,000 people, soaked just moments before, were now completely dry. What makes the miracle of the sun historically unusual is not simply that a crowd at Fatima reported seeing something extraordinary. It's that people miles away who had no idea the children's prophecy was even happening that day had reported seeing the same thing at the same time. Multiple newspapers, not religious publications but mainstream secular papers, including the anti-clerical Diario de Noticias, independently corroborated the strange behavior of the sun that day. Whatever happened at Fatima on October 13, 1917, it was witnessed, described, and published by people who had every motivation to say nothing happened at all. But many, if not all, were forced to admit the exact opposite. It was a miracle. The church, though, did not rush to embrace what happened at Fatima. For 13 years, the local diocese conducted a formal canonical investigation, collecting thousands of pages of witness testimony, cross-examining accounts, and weighing the evidence with deliberate institutional caution. It was not until October 13, 1930, exactly 13 years to the day of the original miracle, that the Bishop of Leiria formally declared the appearances at Fatima worthy of belief, permitting public devotion within the church. Tragically, 2 of the 3 children would not live to see that day. Francisco and Jacinta died shortly after the events of the influenza pandemic that killed tens of millions worldwide in the aftermath of the First World War. Francisco was 10, Jacinta only 9. Lúcia lived a long life as a cloistered Carmelite nun, dying in 2005 at the age of 97, the last living witness to everything that happened in that field. In 2017, exactly 1 century after the first appearance in Fatima, Pope Francis canonized Francisco and Jacinta as saints, making them the youngest non-martyred saints in the nearly 2,000-year history of the Catholic Church. There's one more piece of this story, though, that is often left out. What happened to Portugal itself after all these events? Less than 2 months after the miracle, the anti-clerical government was overthrown. Relations with the Vatican were restored. The most intense period of persecution ended within months of the events at Fatima. Skeptics offer explanations like atmospheric dust, an optical illusion, or even the psychological power of staring at the sun in a crowd primed for a miracle. Believers, however, point to the sheer number of independent witnesses, many of whom were hostile to the idea of miracles, who described identical events from miles away. Whatever you conclude, one fact remains undisputed by historians of any belief. On October 13, 1917, in a muddy field in central Portugal, tens of thousands of people experienced something together that none of them ever forgot. And after it all, 3 children who had been threatened with death for refusing to recant never wavered, not under pressure, not in jail, not for the rest of their lives. Whether you call it a mass phenomenon or a genuine miracle, the witness of Fatima endures because ordinary people saw something they could not explain. And sometimes that's where faith begins. Not in certainty or scientific fact, but in the willingness to stand in the rain, look up, and wonder. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Crown and Palm Chronicles. If this story moved you, consider subscribing for more stories of saints, martyrs, mysteries, and the history that shaped the Catholic faith. Until next time, Godspeed, and may you walk your path with purpose, courage, and faith.